What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. So I recently had someone request that I do a video about the Germans in Latin America. So in this video, I'm just going to give a little historical overview of the Germans that came to the various parts of Latin America, as well as some of their cultural contributions. Ethnic Germans are a minority group in many countries, and contrary to popular belief, the presence of Germans in Latin America was not confined to fugitive Nazis. While the largest German population outside of Germany resides in the United States, the second largest German population is in Brazil, with Argentina following in third place. The primary period of German immigration began in the mid-19th century, including many Germans who pursued commerce and agriculture with a high degree of autonomy. However, Germany's ascent as a world power, combined with Latin American nationalism, would complicate the lives of some of these Germans. And although most Latin American Germans were assimilated, aggressive pan-Germanists and Nazis polarized the situation. Now, starting with Mexico, most ethnic Germans arrived in Mexico during the mid to late 19th century, spurred by government policies of Porfirio Diaz. Most settled in Mexico City, Veracruz, Yucatan, and Puebla. Significant numbers of German immigrants also arrived during and after the First and Second World Wars. Other German towns lie in the states of Nuevo León, Jalisco, Sinaloa, Yucatan, Quintana, and other parts of Puebla, where the German culture and language have been preserved to different extent. The German-Mexican community has largely integrated into Mexican society as a whole while retaining some cultural traits and in turn exerted cultural and industrial influences on Mexican society. Especially after the First World War, intense processes of transculturation can be observed, particularly in Mexico City, Jalisco, Nuevo León, Puebla, and notably with the Maya in Chiapas. These include social, cultural, and identity aspects. Homes in the town of Nueva Alemania resemble the architectural style of northern Germany, and many of this area's settlers came from the cities of Hamburg, Bremen, and Lübeck. Oktoberfest is usually held in several large cities with German-American communities throughout the country. German Mexicans were important in the development of the Mexican cheese and brewing industries. German influence has had a lasting impact on Mexican beers, with brands such as Negro Modelo and Dos Equis, both deriving from a multi-subset of dark lagers known as Vienna style. German roots are particularly notable in Mexican music due to the large numbers of German immigrants in Texas and northern Mexico around the 1830s, most notable through the distribution of German-made accordions. Today, various overlapping styles of music that descended in part from German music include Tejano music, Tex-Mex, quebradita, banda, ranchera, and norteño. Now, moving on to Central America, there was a flurry of interest in German colonization in Central America in the 1840s. Alexander von Bülow was a leading proponent of German colonization of Central America. He had been appointed the director of a colony on Guatemala's Gulf of Honduras coast. Von Bülow brought 3 ships of German immigrants to settle the Costa Rican interior as well in 1851. The 2 most prominent German communities in Central America developed in Guatemala and Costa Rica. In Guatemala, Germans came to dominate the coffee business and showed a strong tendency to band together. In Costa Rica, the Germans became regular members of the National Society. Marriages into prominent Costa Rican families sped up the assimilation process, and German clerics occupied high positions in Costa Rica's Roman Catholic hierarchy. Looking at the Caribbean, Germans were not very numerous in the Caribbean possessions of the European powers, although some were active in commerce, for example, in Cuba and in the Dominican Republic. Many German Jews fleeing Nazism found temporary relief in countries in the Caribbean. Cuba received thousands of refugees, serving mainly as an intermediate sanctuary for Jews intent on reaching the U.S., despite its exclusionary policies. In the Dominican Republic, Rafael Trujillo admitted 800 German Jews to the Dominican Republic on the condition that they pursue agriculture. After the war, Jews with possessions left while others continued farming. Now, some of the cultural remnants of the commerce with the Germans would be evident in the introduction of the accordion into the Dominican Republic in the late 19th century, which would become one of the primary instruments in the folk merengue music of the DR called perico ripiao. In Haiti, the earliest known German settlement in Saint-Domingue was in Bombardopolis. About 1,000 Germans came there in the 18th century and managed to make a living with growing coffee. They received Haitian citizenship from Jean-Jacques Dessalines after 1804 and gradually mixed with the rest of the population. By 1910, Haitian Germans controlled 80% of Haiti's international commerce. In Puerto Rico, German immigration to the islands began in the early parts of the 19th century and continued to increase when German businessmen immigrated and established themselves with their families on the island. Many soldiers of German American background would also be stationed in the island and upon encountering Puerto Ricans of German ancestry, quickly made social circles with them. And lastly, looking at South America, the end of slavery prompted several attempts at German colonization in northern South America. Planters scurrying to obtain alternate sources of labor hired, among others, indentured farmers from Germany. In Venezuela, Charles V, in debt to the German bankers, in 1529 granted Venezuela to the Walsers and other lands south of the equator to the Fugers. In 1530, a colony of Germans settled in the vicinity of Maracaibo, Venezuela. In the 18th century, a faction of the political parties successfully garnered government assistance to settle Germans in the country. Venezuela received its fair share of Germans to the Latin American coffee industry, with many settling in Tovar, joining its conservative elite. In the late 19th century, German coffee planters joined commercial firms and diplomats as members of the elite German communities of Venezuela and Colombia. In Colombia, the first German immigrants arrived in the 16th century, contracted by the Spanish crown, and included explorers such as Ambrosio Alfinger. Many Germans would also come to Colombia by way of Venezuela. In 1941, the United States government estimated that there were around 5,000 Germans living in Colombia. There was also some Nazi agitators in Colombia, but the majority was apolitical. Colombia asked Germans who were on the U.S. blacklist to leave and allowed Jewish refugees in the country illegally to stay. In Colombia, the use of the button accordion in vallenato music is a legacy left by the Germans that settled in the country. Brazil was the foremost destination of Germans, and the country received 250,000 Germans between the 19th and 20th century. The first initiative for German settlement in southern Brazil was sparked by the armed conflicts over the secession of Uruguay in the 1820s, calling a need to secure soldiers. Brazil was unsuccessful in retaining Uruguay, but German mercenaries and colonists became established in its three southernmost provinces. The number of Germans in the urban areas of Brazil, whether agriculturalists, craftsmen, or transitory employees of German commercial houses, grew greatly. German immigrants preserved their language more than any other group of immigrants in Brazil. This was mainly due to a shared cultural identity and the desire to recreate in Brazil an environment with characteristics of the country they believed they would never return to. Today, beer is the most consumed beverage in Brazil. The tradition of brewing in Brazil dates back to German immigration in the early 19th century, with the first breweries dating back to the 1830s. The brand Bohemia is claimed to be the first Brazilian beer, with production starting in 1853 in the city of Petrópolis, founded by the German-Brazilian Henrique Kramer. In Argentina, those of German ancestry constitute about 8% of the Argentine population. Between 1885 and the First World War, the population of Argentina doubled with the influx of 3 million European immigrants, 100,000 of whom spoke German. Strong German communities developed in Argentina, and especially in Buenos Aires, with their own schools, hospitals, shops, theaters, sports clubs, and banks. Many of these Germans who immigrated directly from Germany were assimilated with the upper middle class of Buenos Aires, but maintained strong ties to German culture. The town of Villa General Belgrano was founded by Germans in the 1930s. In the 1960s, it became the site of the Fiesta Nacional de la Cerveza, or Oktoberfest, which has become a major attraction in Argentina. By 1940, there were 250,000 people of German descent living in the country. Nazi minister Walter Dahrre was born in Argentina. After the Second World War, almost 1,000 prominent Nazi leaders and politicians fled to Argentina. Kurt Tank, who developed some of the greatest World War II aircraft fighters, also entered Argentina in the late 1940s. The few German agricultural colonies of the Middle Andean nations were not successful, but Germans in commerce prospered. In the 19th century, colonies were planted in Peru and Ecuador. Peru's colony, Bosuso, was organized by Baron von Schutz-Holzhausen. Bolivia's German population, involved primarily in commerce and mining, was small and assimilated quickly. Intermarriage was common, and German Bolivians became accepted members of Bolivian society. A substantial part of the German population in Bolivia are Mennonites from Russia, who are of German heritage, culture, and language. Chile received considerable numbers of Germans and accommodated successful agricultural colonies. Half of the approximately 10,000 Germans that settled in Chile before the First World War became members of agriculturally oriented communities in southern Chile. Many Germans engaged in commercial and industrial pursuits in Chile's urban centers as well. While urban German Chileans assimilated easily, the southern rural Germans clung to their European heritage. And that concludes this here video. I hope that you all enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down below, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!